Well, once again, my name's Robin Heppell, and today we're talking about why omnichannel marketing beats single channel tactics. And I want to look at this just so that you can see the kind of the bigger picture of digital marketing, and again, making your marketing as efficient as possible, but also as effective as possible. And I saw this way back, maybe 15, 20 years ago. So it seems that the problem is not a new problem, but where, does your marketing look like a ransom note? Meaning it's got, you're doing one thing here and one thing over there, and they're not, it's disjointed, and sometimes the fonts are different and the logos are even different. And we want to make sure that it's a very conjoined, very smooth and streamlined effort that you're putting out. The other thing too, though, and we'll get into this a little bit later, is that it's not just one channel that people come in and find you and go forward, choosing your funeral home or cremation service. They're looking at a number of different things. And so it's beneficial for them to, see your ad on a different platform or a post on a different platform, but still looks the same font, same logo. So we want to encourage that, and doing that, managing that all too, and making that easy for you all in one place. The other thing too is that some of the marketing that is available now, they're just not as strong, individually, right? So even like Google AdWords, that's a good place. It's very direct. People that use that are going to probably need you, but other people may be coming through other areas that we don't want to miss. So we don't want to have any lost opportunities. And so we want this more omni-channel marketing machine, and so that everything fits in well together. We'll have we can then, as information comes in, we can also track it too. You can also see from when someone comes in all the different touch points that they've had, instead of logging into one place and logging into another. So this may sound complicated in the beginning, but it should make sense by the end, or that's the goal. And if it doesn't, I'll just stay on until I get all those questions answered. Now, it's marketing, has really changed, and from the 2000 teens, even later on, even before kind of the pandemic, right? There were Facebook people, and there was email marketing, and there was direct mail, and there was Google Ads, and there was SEO, and we had all these silos. And one of the things that we had then too is that you could actually really fine tune one category and see changes, just really doing that. Now, as digital marketing as a whole has matured, one of the things that I see, and if you've probably heard me talk about this before, like Google has taken away so much of the control of Google Ads that now we have to use other things like native keywords to really fine tune that. And we've got, I dive in deep onto Google Ads here in a moment. And then And then what happens is then, things started to change a little bit. People had been using their mobile phones, but really, mobile phone usage really jumped up 5 years ago, to be the main dominant player. So I know that we're usually looking at our computer screens, but lots of folks are, and especially your customers are, they're on their iPhones or their Samsungs, or they're also on their tablets, and that's what they or laptops. So even it might be a computer, but it might be a smaller version. So we need to be aware of where they're at and how they're receiving the message. So we have to make sure that your marketing fits in those different resolutions that they're receiving it. And then a few years back, 23, 24, AI started, and really, sure, there's AI, but there's also with that, and bound within it is its automation, and this is where we can start to connect things together. We're with a lot of the different AI tools out there. There's MCPs and APIs and things like that allow you to connect so that information can securely be transferred among even different programs, but also then channel into one place where you can keep control of that and see what's really happening. So now what we'll do is we'll just go into the different digital marketing sections, these channels, and just kind of see what's happened and kind of where we're at now and what we can do. And if you have any specific questions about, say, Google Ads like this one, feel free to ask them, and we can stop and continue and address those now or at the end if you wish. So with Google Ads, and this is kind of the main one, and I've really seen a shift even in the last 6 months to even maybe 2 years ago, but lately Google keeps on taking away our ability to we have our we set up our keywords of what we want to bid on, and and then we get the search terms that that they send to us. And it's not like I always use this example, like I would much rather bid on the term funeral homes plural than funeral home singular. I don't know how many times I've used this reference, but if you were looking for Chinese food in Victoria here, there's lots of amazing Chinese restaurants. And there was one called Ming's right by the funeral home. So if I was looking for, Ming's Chinese restaurant, I'd call it singular, like it would be restaurant with no S. Or if I was Googling and I was looking for Chinese food, I'd search for Chinese restaurants plural in Victoria, and we used to be able to bid on that one word and spend more money on the plural version than the singular version, or not even bid on the singular version at all. Now it's really hard to. We're really working on with Google utilizing the negative keywords to the point now that we're using those adjectives especially for low cost, simple, cheap, those things. And if you're a full service funeral home, not only would we not bid on those, because if we don't bid on the words, it doesn't mean that search may not show up if we're still bidding on the funeral homes, your location. But if the search was low cost funeral homes and you were like a full service funeral home and weren't kind of in that low cost part of the market, most major centers now have kind of these two platforms of, kind of your full service and then your lower cost, discount, whatever you want to call it, simple, basic. There's a separation there. So what we've started doing now is we will actually use those adjectives, low cost, cheap, and lots of different ones that probably people don't search for, discount. We actually use those as negative keywords so that there would be, for that full service funeral home, that ad won't show up at all. Because there's probably a good chance that you're not going to serve that family. Before it's, there's now enough choices out there that they can keep searching to find what they want. And, I'm always very protective of your budget. So I want to make sure that, your ads aren't getting triggered and then, I don't mean like triggered as the way young kids use the word triggered, but they're not showing up on the results page, and then maybe getting clicked on, and then people quickly go away if they see prices that are too expensive for them, or they don't see prices at all and they look for something else. So we just it's just a new strategy to work on really protecting your budget, and we can even like reduce your budget with Google, because we just want those very specific funeral homes near me, and then with all these other negative keywords, or funeral homes in my city, and just bid on those only, and not kind of those ones that, we could probably rank for that, but those ones can just, eat up the budget, and we can shift that money to be visible elsewhere if it's not part of your strategy. And also too, the way that SERPs that you see at the bottom of the screen there, SERPs is search engine results page. That's the name where when you go into Google and you type it in, you land on the SERP page. And but now there could be, depending on the search, there could be like an AI answers at the top, and there could be then your Google ads, and there could be then the maps with you using your Google business profile, and then your organic keywords down below, or your organic listings down below. So it's really changed before, when Google ads really kind of owned the search results. Now it's just part of it. Not saying that to do away with it, but it doesn't have the same power as it used to. Now, when we look a little further and we look at our local SEO, so an SEO just for folks is search engine optimization. So that's ranking as high as possible, without having to pay for it on a per click basis. And we used to focus on just again those same keywords and those locations. So local SEO is the category keyword and the geographic keyword. So it would be funeral homes in Dallas, Texas, and those two parts would be what make up local SEO. If you search for Home Depot and didn't put in a geographical keyword, then that's just a general SEO search. Maybe you're just looking for information, or if you're looking for an airline or something like that. So but what's, as this has transitioned, right? So they've added more. The maps are getting pulled in, and we'll talk about maps in the next slide. But even now, they're also scanning for answers. So people now who are more searching by voice, like maybe they're in their car and they just hold up their phone and they, instead of saying, cremation providers in Orlando, Florida, they might say, hey, I'm looking for a cremation company located in Orlando, and I want to make sure that they're open on Saturdays. And you can go on and have this conversation, excuse me, with your with your phone to ChatGPT, Claude, Grok, Gemini, whoever you're using. And what happens is when that happens, so with that happening, we want to utilize like FAQ. So one of the things that we do for folks, but it's something that you can do yourself. Hopefully, everyone has like an FAQ page on their website. You can also, though, you can go into ChatGPT and say, I want, can you give me a look at my website? And, here's my FAQ page. Can you give me 10 other FAQs that I might be missing? And it will create them for you. And then you can take that information, you can edit it, and then you can give it to your web developer and say, okay, I want these ones about funerals on the funeral page, and have 3 or 4 there. And then you say, I want these ones about cremation on the cremation page. And then you have maybe a couple of FAQs about aftercare services, and that goes on your aftercare page. And so what that's doing is, and they can still be on your, they can be added to your FAQ page, this just makes sense. And, I'm guilty of this for creating hundreds of websites with a FAQ page and not having the FAQs on that particular page. But that's where probably people have questions. So they've looked at your, cremation services page, and they've got some questions about cremation. Probably would be better to have questions and answers on that page. Like, it makes sense. We just never did it. But we're doing that now, and that's something that you can do, or maybe your website developer is offering that to you. That is something that you can do. So it's because now the benefit of that is then even on Google, and right at the moment on the the top right hand side, it might pull up an answer, and it might pull up your answer, and there'd be like a little, it shows the favicon, who's left the, if it's one person, then it would show the name, or it might show 2 or 3 websites. But what we're experienced too is people are not always clicking through. Maybe they're just getting the answer there, and if at all possible, it's be best for you to provide the answer than someone else. So that's another thing that what's really changed over the last 5 to 10 years. The next is the Google Business Profile, and it's funny, I can't even remember how many times they've changed their name. Google, one of the biggest, if not the biggest company in the world. They, Google Places, Google Plus, Google My Business, and I'm sure there's been a couple others in there. Now, and for a while now, it's been Google Business Profile, which is a good, it says what it is, and they've had that now for a number of years. But we used to get we'd want to get reviews. We weren't really active about getting reviews. And, we'd want testimonials. Then we were, getting prodded by Google. Hey, make sure your Google business profile is up to date, and make sure you add your hours, and it will, and you need to have, they call it NAP. So NAP is name, address, phone number. So if you ever see NAP, all caps, that's what it's referring to. And what they want is they want consistency of your name on all parts of the internet. So your name on your website needs to be exactly the same as on your Google business profile and any other places. So Chamber of Commerce or Better Business Bureau, you want not just your name, but your address, and if at all possible, you want your if it's street and you spell it out on your website, you want it spelled out in these other places. If you're using ST period, you want an ST period on the others. Some sites don't, they kind of have control over that. But again, you want it to be consistent. Now, back in the olden days, like in 2016, there would be like lots of funeral homes. It'd be like Heppell Funeral Home, and we've been in business for 100 years, and we wouldn't want to, even though cremation, we're we're in a market that there's more cremation than burial. And so we might just say, oh yeah, we're going to rank better if we just change our name in Google to Heppell Funeral and Cremation Services. Well, if that's not our name, our proper business name, and it's not consistent, it's actually then a detriment to our rankings and that. And I used to see people kind of try to fudge that all the time, and I'd kind of warn them, like, hey, don't you could get delisted from Google if you continue to do that. But now I think more people kind of have that. But it's really important, even when you're whether you're a new firm or you're an existing firm for a long time, and you haven't included, maybe it's just, again, like Heppell Funeral Home, you don't, but you think you really should get cremation in there. Depending on your state or province, you need to check with them, but it wouldn't hurt to get like a DBA and then change it, and then you just use the DBA kind of moving forward, so that you could have Heppell Funeral and Cremation Service to include that, because that in itself will have the word cremation throughout help you with your site, since it'll be on every footer of every page and that. So that's one thing to consider is your NAP, and same with your phone number. And what's interesting too is especially between Canada and the United States is in the US, they have generally speaking, they will have their phone number without brackets. So it'll just be the area code and then the 3-digit prefix dash 4-digit suffix. In Canada, the area code is usually around as parentheses around it, and then space, and then prefix dash suffix. And so, even though the way you do it, no matter how you do it, you just want it to be consistent. And it's only, 6 months ago that I knew that there was this general difference between the two countries. So, and before we leave Google Business Profile, because this seems to have the a big impact on how well you rank, and really it kind of defeat, if you're a newer funeral home, I'd really focus on this, because that other funeral home that could be 100 years old, if they're not up to date on getting reviews and actively getting them, this is the easiest way, even though it's not easy, but it's the easiest way to be seen with a lot better in Google's eyes than some funeral home that's been around a long time, but just kind of not up to date, which Google is trying to sort out. So we can always see how many searches, how many reviews a funeral home has, or any business, and we can see their rating. So we can see if they're like 4.9, 4.8, if they're 5, they're 3.4, and so it's very easy. You just by looking in like less than a second, you can see those two factors. But what you can't see, and what Google is making, they don't tell us exactly how important this is, but they tell us that it is really important, is that you also need to have recency. So if you have, as an example, I'm not saying that this is exactly how it works in Google, but just for illustration purposes, it's probably better to have 10 reviews in the last six months than 50 reviews from 6 months to 2 years ago. So if one firm only had 10 reviews, but they're all recent, and another firm had 50 reviews, but they're all from a year ago or more, there's a good chance that that first firm might be outranking for that purpose. The other thing too that we can look at, but you got to kind of dig through everyone, is the responses. So whether it's a good or not a good review, it's good to respond to everyone. You can thank people for it, for leaving a review, or you can try to address any situations that they have. Always take the high road, offer an olive branch, try to get it so that you're kind of trying to solve that problem without picking a fight online. And there's going to be some people that are just they're just angry people. Maybe as maybe they're dealing with a death that was unexpected, and they're not in a good spot, and they're venting, and maybe something happened, but or there's going to be some times where it's not the next of kin, and so I would be professional in addressing that, and just say, I see this quite a bit, where there's like an estranged child who, maybe there's 3 kids, and 2 kids are looking after their mom and everything's fine, and then there's this estranged kid that doesn't ever talk to the mom, and then wonders why they got left out of the arrangements, or and they start to vent online, and they give you a 1-star review. It's just you would want to address that, because if it goes unaddressed, then you can that will not look good for you, both in Google's eyes, but also the public's eyes. And the public, they're not stupid. So if you get a poor review and someone's flown off the handle, and then you write a review that's again kind of just stating the facts, and I'm sorry, but we're obligated to deal with the executor and for these services, and we dealt with the executor or the executors, and that's what we had, and that's what we do. we're regulated by law to take direction from the executor or whatever it is, explain it, and people will see that. Now, in some cases, if it's a negative review and you've replied to it, you can also, after that, report it to Google if it's someone who's not, the next of kin or executor. And you could say, this is a fraudulent review. We've addressed it, because Google will want you to address it anyway. But then you could have it, you could ask for it to be removed. And just one thing, and which is great. Sometimes these people who are like flying off the handle, they'll say some like hearsay. And an example of that is they'll say, I heard that you're a really crappy funeral home, and this just proves it. And you know what? My friend also used you like 2 years ago, and he said the same thing, that you guys are garbage. And that, whether maybe it's all true, but that point of when he said, and then, and someone else said, or if there's any form of hearsay, Google will like delete the review right away. So sometimes it's even better for them to fly off the handle, because it's easier to get those removed. So anyway, you want to make sure that you're actively trying to get your reviews, and you're wanting to respond to all of them. So kind of went a little in the weeds there, but hopefully that's helpful. Now, with social media, and I've always had kind of a hierarchy, and it's still the same. And so how I've even presented this this presentation with Google Ads, then local SEO, then online reputation like Google My Business, and then social media. Social media, I would think, would be fourth. If you're going to do three, you do the three that we've just talked about. But to have that omni-channel, because people they're on social media all the time, and more so than they were before. So you want to, it's good to have your appearance on there. We used to just put obituaries up there, and I would tell folks like, hey, putting your obits up there and that's it. Well, hey, that's better than nothing. And at least you're, creating some content and not having just a stagnant page that's no one's doing anything. But now, there's more things that you can, that all the different social media have, right? So even within Facebook, right? Facebook has their regular posts, but they've got their reels. And so you need to, it's good to be there. Now what's, and we'll get into this in a little bit, is, repurposing. So if you put some content in one place, repurpose that and put that somewhere else. So like just this webinar itself, we will take it, we're recording it right now, and then we'll post the whole recording, but we'll also take chunks of it and we'll repurpose these in smaller chunks too. So, and that's what you should always be thinking. The other thing too with social media, there is a hierarchy still of social media, and the people that we're trying to, we're looking at kind of the bigger, you want to look at the bigger pot of fish first, and then we'll work down from there. So Facebook's probably, if you're going to do one out of any, do Facebook, and then Instagram, even though they're both owned by Zuckerberg, and, Meta as a whole. But, I would, if you can, do both. You can then use LinkedIn. LinkedIn's good from a professional standpoint. So, there are other business people in your community, and those people have influence too. So, this is more kind of indirect marketing, but I would say to, if you have things to share on LinkedIn from a professional standpoint, other business owners or leaders in your market would would see that, and that's helpful for you. And then there's Pinterest, and hey, I'm not logging into my Pinterest account on a daily basis or weekly or monthly, maybe annually, just to make sure everything's up to, it's still active. But other people are on there all the time, and so you can again repurpose some of that information onto Pinterest. Then there's Twitter or X, and it's quite newsy, and it at this time, if you need to not be on it, then that's fine. You're probably not going to lose calls because you're not on Twitter. And TikTok, even though it's coming up, and sure, there, I hear, you hear on social media, hey, this funeral home got a new call from their TikTok ad, or their TikTok post. And sure, that happens. Those are usually isolated incident, or they're isolated events, and it would, and sure, like it's great if you get that, but you have to realize that you're probably touching more people if you look back at the Facebook than maybe on TikTok. So again, now you can use systems that you put it up in one place, or you choose, and it can be posted in all other places, just like we did for this webinar. So in this webinar, we load up our ads and our promotional posts, and we can put them into all of these. We don't put them into Twitter, but we do even put them on TikTok. So it's my market though is probably different than your market. So the nice thing is you doing it all from one place, not having to log in 5 different times to 5 different marketing channels. And also, I don't want to bypass video and YouTube. YouTube is the second largest search engine next to Google, and people spend more and more time on YouTube. People that becomes their TV, and before they kind of look at the I almost said before they open up the TV guide, but probably haven't had that for 20 years. But before they kind of go look at the guide on the TV in for their cable, maybe they're checking out what's new on YouTube. And we do have to be careful, and we are in a profession, and so our persona is important. So when you're creating your videos, like it used to be you'd need to get like cameras and have a crew and the lighting and all that, then you'd have to edit it all, where now you can use things like a smartphone, and as long as you haven't like the audio is much better than it used to be, and the most important thing about video is audio production. So someone will look at it kind of a grainy video, as long as the audio is good. If you have a perfect video with audio that maybe there's like wind or something and you can't understand it, it is very hard to listen to the person. And so if you can't listen to them, people just will turn that off. So the most important thing in videos is the audio. And but now it is kind of acceptable, especially in reels and other things, like if you're on TikTok, you can use like your handheld device, even holding it, if you have something. So you need to just feel where you're most comfortable, and it's easier and easier to produce. And if you have a teenager at home, you could ask them, hey, if I was to pay you, and if you were to shoot video with your camera or with your phone, what could you do, and could you make it look professional and things like that? So it's something that you could do. Got a question here. So the question is, with multiple locations, how important is it that each location has its own social media channels? Off the top of my head, and I'll preface this in a little bit after. I would hope that, I think it would have a good presence in one solid presence. Now there's a couple of factors. So if it's the same brand name, so exact same brand name, same logo, everything, then that leans to one. In different markets, people could belong to, they could be in, let's say Toronto. So, Toronto's in they're in the top 5 of cities in North America. And, you can get, even being in one of the, municipalities kind of outside of Toronto, you can still say Toronto and that's fine. But then there's other towns, like Detroit, who has that. And then, Detroit just has all these smaller towns outside the city limits, even though it's part of greater Detroit. And you could be driving down the road and you don't know that you've just driven through, 3 different towns with 3 different names and that. So that makes it a little bit more difficult for searching. So I would, this is just a gut feeling. What I would do is have one brand, and then within that, switch. You could have a video or a post about one of those towns, and then have another one about one of the other towns. So you're getting those keywords in at different times. Now, 3 or 4 years ago, when Facebook reviews were a lot more important, they don't seem to be as important anymore. They would always be put towards the location. Well, and Google's the same, because they're being put towards the location. But it's not, you're not having usually you're not going to have 4 Facebook pages. You're going to have one, and and maybe name your name your main one as the address. That's what I would do. I'd still keep one, because also too, it's work. And if you have 2 separate ones, you've just doubled the amount of work, where you could probably from a time commitment, and again, this is just kind of my gut feeling, would be you have one, and then maybe you're spending 50% more time having a video about location A, and then a video or post about B, and then back to A and B, and then a few general ones along the way. So it wouldn't be double the work. And you also want to, I really stress, if at all possible, that the name stays consistent. So the first thing that I do whether it's Futurist or Robin Heppell, is I go through and I get every name, username that I can in all the different social media channels, URLs, just for that consistency. You don't want a different name here and a different name there. So as soon as you start having if I had Heppell Funeral and then like Victoria and then Heppell Funeral, Colwood and Heppell Funeral, Souk, those are kind of smaller areas, kind of in the greater area. It's just complicating it a bit. So as I've talked this through, I'm more now solid on my thought of one name, one account, one channel, but in those individual posts that you're switching it up a bit. But I could be proven wrong there. So I hope that helps. And just kind of as we kind of pull this together, right? So these channels, they're all important, but they play a bit of a different role. And but they're all important. So you wouldn't want to just only solely focus on one without looking after the others. And if you've been a heavier user of Google Ads in the past, and you haven't really thought, like if it's kind of the same for the last 5 years, and you haven't thought of changing, I'd think it's time to change. We've done this with a couple clients where they've reduced their ad budget by half, and then they've been able to even pay for us looking after their local SEO, their online reputation management, and even social media marketing. So you can do that, and you like on a monthly basis, you're not spending any more money. You're just spending it wiser. And Google Ads, although important, not as important as it used to be. And it's because Google has slowly just taken away who controls how much you spend. Now, ultimately, you control how much you spend, but they control what you spend it on. And so we're tightening the focus on that, and then using some of those other funds to look at some of the other channels that people are also on. And then we need to, just really watch, because the getting the first, they click the ad or they click the post, or they're clicking your lead generation or lead magnet, and then what happens there? So they download their planning guide, and then what happens? So it's not just okay, you get an email into your inbox saying that Rob Heppell filled out downloaded your planning guide, and then what happens, right? So with the benefit of having like a more of a, and you'll hear this term more and more, a workflow, you'll actually see, people will come into that workflow, and you can reach out to them at multiple points, maybe by email, maybe by text message if they left their mobile phone number. So there's there's a lot more opportunity to talk to them, and they may not be ready right now. So then, are you kind of sifting through your inbox and, I haven't talked to this person for a long time. They were interested. I wonder what happened to them. Instead of putting them into your inbox, and and then maybe if they don't take action right away, they go from one workflow into another. And we would have these immediate workflows of someone who's downloaded a free planning guide, and they get 3 or 4 messages, again, whether it be email, or maybe they then if they left their phone number, they get a text message, and then they but then if they don't take action, then we're funeral professionals, we're not going to hound people, so we, instead of forgetting about them, we then put them into a nurture campaign, and maybe once a quarter they get an email to our community newsletter or something like that, or we're just every quarter we're sending out just helpful information about our area, or about planning, just very soft, but you're again keeping your keeping in touch with them. And again, I'm not saying email them every week, because that's a for sure way of getting unsubscribed from. But if we can do that on a quarterly basis, I think is a very safe place to do that. They're not going to say, oh, you hound me all the time. You say, well, I send you an email every 3 months. Like, you can unsubscribe if you want. And just on a side, if you ever receive those emails of someone complaining that you're sending too many emails, even though I know you're not, usually they've just hit reply and emailed you back saying, stop, you're sending me all these emails. How come you're sending me so many emails? I just scroll down, oh yeah, here's the unsubscribe link. It's their link. And I just click it and I'll unsubscribe them. Then I don't have to worry about it anymore. And kind of before we kind of go away, and we've talked a lot about digital marketing here, I do want to mention that it's not all marketing is digital marketing. Some of it's offline marketing. Maybe maybe there's an ad in the newspaper, or maybe we've sent some direct mail, but lots of those ads though should have your call to action. And so that's what, if you see the term CTA there at the bottom. And what happens is, the call to action is to fill out a form, or enter in your email address to download our free guide, and they do that, and then you have them in your system, and you can then follow up with them. So even if it originally starts offline, TV, radio, billboards, you can bring them online and bring them into your system. And also too, you might see CRM here. CRM is customer relation management. So that's it works similar to your case management system, in the fact that it revolves around a person's name, and where the case management system is managing that case, that first call, and burial or cremation and service or whatever they're having with you, where the CRM is just managing kind of the marketing for that person. And so we will actually have people in a pre-need environment, we're managing them through the CRM, and then that person dies, and then they're in the case management system, and then they're picked back up for aftercare. Not that person, obviously, because they've now passed away, but then the next of kin would be in aftercare and communicated to, and gently marketed to, humbly solicited for their business in the future. So if if this is something that interests you, we have our funeral clients CRM. It's part of a CRM called Go High Level, and you have your big players, your Salesforce and your HubSpot, and those though are kind of more enterprise type systems. But if for marketing purposes, ours is not only is it the Go High Level one, but it's two things. One, we're able to kind of rebrand it, white label it, have it our own, and we've totally funeralized ours, just so how people are communicated, just the tone of the messages and things like that. That's in there, and it's just very. The other thing about High Level is that coming up with new things all the time to add to it. So it's much greater than just a CRM. It allows us to manage your Google Ads, manage your web forms, post to social media, handle your email, have chat messages, or chat bot, or your AI voice agent that's on your website. That's all done within the CRM, and then you can then communicate with them in one place afterwards. Yeah, we've kind of talked about this one already, where you just don't want that lead to sit there and wait. And I'll explain to you. Actually, no, I've got a diagram of the pre-need. Here. So what happens is, and so part of my history in the last 5 years, right? So I had funeral results marketing, sold it in 2020, stuck around until 2022, and then kind of left funeral marketing and joined the local funeral home again, where I apprenticed back in the 80s and late 80s. And then, but started also really understanding AI, and so really kind of have been able to grow that business, that pre-need business. And the owner says, like, hey, like, how come like all your arrangements are like, you have these one-time arrangements? Like, you're not being really overly aggressive, are you? And that's not my nature. And I said, no, we're just doing that. Well, how do you do it? I said, well, we're using, kind of, if we think of the marketing funnel, right? And so people, they make their inquiry, we communicate with them, then they may, we give them some information. We send them a link to book a calendar appointment. They do so. We send them we send them an agenda of what we're going to go over. It includes taking your vital stats. By the way, here's a link. You can fill that out ahead of time. Then it goes into, here are the different choices that we're going to cover. You can read through that just so you have an idea. So that when those folks, not everyone, but when a majority of those folks come in, they're further down that marketing funnel, for me, and now we've got another gal working there, and she even said to me, she said, well, this system is just, it kind of makes it easy. And I think, shh, don't tell anyone. Not that it's, hey, there's always things to improve upon, and and we're doing that, but and some of that is, it's just not all manual work, right? We automate some of the steps so that it makes the things that we have to do personally, makes them easier, because we just don't have as many to do. So it's it's quite it's been quite successful, and that program has grown from not very active at all, especially coming out of COVID, to where it is now, and it's greater than it's ever been, and we're still growing, right? So, and the next step will be to get someone else doing the sales. So we'll have two people doing the sales, and I'll oversee that. With the automations, we can we're also we've looked at these quite deeply, in that so someone fills out a form, or they fill out a form, we can send that, here's your download. We make it look like it's an automated response, but then we send an email later that might be 4 or 5 paragraphs. We don't send that email 1 minute after they fill out the form, because that doesn't look right. We send that out 30 minutes later. Thanks for asking for a download copy of our planning guide. Hopefully you were able to download that. Let me know if you have any questions. Here's a link to my calendar, and then if you have their cell phone, mobile phone number, you can send a text message, very brief, just saying if you're interested, you can set an appointment to come in, and we can finalize your arrangements, or I can answer your questions about your pre-arrangements. And you can just that's not taking any effort on my part. It's just all automated, well spaced out, not pushy, but it makes it a lot easier, again, as they're kind of further down that funnel. So now folks want to know, kind of how much will this cost? And so we have our digital marketing services, right? And they're all like $3.95 each. I've kind of kept them that way. One thing that I do at Futurist, and maybe this is because I was able to then rebuild the marketing company from the perspective of having some. Not that everything's automated, and AI doesn't run it. It doesn't run anything, but we utilize AI and we utilize automations, and we pass that on to you. So I've got a much smaller staff than I used to, doing a lot more work, and it's because we're more efficient. And one of the reasons why we're more efficient is the use of AI, and the other reason why we're more efficient is that we've got automations in place. So we pass that on to you, and though what's even more efficient for ourselves is if we're looking after everything, so we can make sure that your marketing is consistent, the brand's on point. We, inside of our CRM, there's a brand guide, so it's always referencing your colors, your fonts, and so that everything then is, there's a consistency to that. And with that, we can bundle all four of these like into an Omnichannel marketing bundle for $9.95, and it includes having access to the CRM. So that's some folks just charge $1,000 for Google Ads, and we think that you can we can do that for for less, and also you're getting the benefit of these other points as well. Now there's for the social media marketing, obviously this is kind of our starting level of that. You can ramp that up if you wanted more, but I think this is where you'd want to start, making sure that you're covering kind of these four areas, and then if you want to take it further, then we can add more social media to that, because these other ones, they kind of have a natural growth, and you're gonna get benefits from local SEO with your more of your social media marketing. And just like we talked about earlier, we will repurpose some of that marketing, so you'll see some consistencies through articles on your website, and then those articles can be turned into that one article with 5 sections can then be 5 separate social media posts, that type of thing. And the CRM, then kind of on top of that, we could also add your chatbot or voice agent that would go on your website if you wanted to take it that next step. That's $195 extra. You've already got the CRM, so that's something that and we're going to be talking about that in the next month or two, kind of that part in more detail. I've got another question here. Okay, so the question's about, will the CRM hook into systems like whether you're using Passari or SRS or Tribute Tech, kind of their case management systems. And here's the way it is at the moment. The way it is they kind of have this rule that they don't let anything come in. They totally preserve their environment. Now they'll though push things out, so they can maybe hook up through API, and they can push information out, and maybe you set it up in a way that when it comes to scheduling an aftercare appointment, that's a time where you have them push information, but they will not receive information. We used to have this issue with obituaries before, when we would have our websites that had obits, and they had an obituary feature on their website or on their system. We couldn't push anything in. We could extract it, but we couldn't push it. So that's just something that we can do, and it kind of works like with the using the CRM. It's probably going to be the CRM itself would be more of a like a pre-need tool, and then until that death occurs. And unfortunately, at this point, you will have to copy that information over into the case management system. And things may be birth dates never changed, and but name could have changed, address could have changed, lots of other things could have changed, right? So but then it's in the case management system, and I'd recommend not just not worrying about the CRM at that point. And then now that you're dealing with the next of kin or the executor, that eventually that information gets pushed out to the system, to the CRM, and then that can look after aftercare information. It can look after asking for a Google review, and then it could just gently hint to them about the benefits of pre-planning, and go from there. And then they're in your CRM, and they can be in a nurture program and go from there. So I hope that answers the question. So just kind of wrapping up, I just hope that you kind of see how you can go from one side to just that ransom note marketing, which I still love that. I can't remember where I first saw that. It was probably 20 years ago or so. And, now though, you can have this like marketing machine of everything kind of in one area, controlling it. And if it's coming from outside of that machine, at least getting the contact in there, and then you can, have those workflows that walk them through steps. It's not just an inbox full of leads, right? And one of the things with the workflows is that we can set them up so that, if it's like a week-long workflow, or maybe let's just say it's a lunch and learn that you're planning. So you've done some marketing, and the lunch and learn is going to be on July 25th, and it's the 15th or 16th today. And so, they sign up, and then, they get an email right away. They get an email giving them more detail. Maybe they get them a text message. And then, but in that workflow, we can also have a notification that goes to the pre-need rep that says, phone this person at this phone number, and personally invite them, or personally tell them you're looking forward to having them come to the event. So you can you can do that. You can also automate that, where you can have the AI voice bot phone. That's entirely up to you if you want to do that or not, but that's possible to do so. So if if you want everything all connected, please feel free to reach out, and we can do this for funeral homes. We can do this for cremation providers, and we do them slightly differently. The systems are the same, the workflows are different, and we can do some more things with cremation providers, like we can put in a solution so that you don't need call answering service anymore. It could be done, that could be done by AI and automations. And just on that point, with our voice AI, we recommend that you say that it is hi, this is Rob, your AI assistant. You don't have to yell at them that it's AI, but you've told them, you're being upfront, and with that, you always get a transcript of exactly what was said. And but we'll go into that, as I said, at another time. And the nice thing about some of these items is that, when we first started talking about AI voice agents a year ago, and they're it's not like they made them and then they just left them on the shelf. They are way better than they ever were. And the next thing is getting to the point where we can, almost there, maybe in 6 months, you'll just be able use your voice. So although that might be a little weird, but you can hi, this is Rob, and and it's my voice, stammering away, talking to the person. Probably the AI would do a better job than I would. So if you're interested, just go to my calendar, funeralfuturist.com/meet, and we can chat about how this might work for your system. And different locations, will have different applications. Different business models will have different applications, but the nice thing is that a lot of it can be now in one place. At the Funeral Unconference there a couple weeks ago, right? They talked about the omnichannel marketing, and really this I couldn't agree more. This is it. Everything's here in one place. You can manage it and just make it more efficient for you, and way more beneficial. Our pre-need is there to prove it. It just gets, people, keep booking appointments. They come in, they're prepared, they bring their checkbook, and they've already given us the vital stats information, and and they're much more prepared. So it's just easier having that mid-funnel conversation with them than the top of a funnel conversation with them. Thanks for the comments. I appreciate that. It was, I'll just give a little bit of background here from, when I sold the company in 2020 to Jake Johnson's company, because at that time I felt that having, custom made kind of bespoke websites were, that folks would have to pay for. We were losing out to all these companies that started making free websites, and they're making all their money off of selling flowers and trees and stuff like that. And so I went through that process, which afterwards, what I did then was start to study about learn about AI and how that works, and And then notice that, you know what, these technology websites, like they do some things very well. They sell lots of flowers and trinkets and trees and stuff like that. But you know what, they lack on some of the marketing, and they're like, you know, they have this kind of one broad plan, and you know, you try to fit into, you try to get your system to work into theirs, where what I'm seeing now is we're able to have something customized for your situation that's different than can be different from someone else. And one of the other things too is, kind of in that whole process of, my clients getting sold to Johnson, and then he ended up selling the websites to Tukio's. So a number of the our clients have Tukio websites, and some of them we've actually taken the website part back, but they still do the obits. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. They can get their obits generate revenue, again, from flowers and trees and other things that they sell. But then the website side, it's marketing, and sure, you have to pay for it, but you're far less than just getting an extra call. And if we can do that, because I know for sure we can outmarket what they do, because we can do it specifically for your situation. So, if you have any questions at all, feel free you can email me at robin@futurist.com. You can text me. My number is 250-686-4576. And or just book a time, and we can chat, and hopefully I could help you out, because there's I think this is a great opportunity for you to be able to and no one will know what you're doing. That's the nice thing, because all this stuff is behind the scenes, and they're like, hey, that guy seems a lot busier, that gal, they seem, I don't know what it is. I'm watching their ads. They're not doing anything different, but it's the behind the scenes part that where we can really help you, and probably at a cost that's not going to cost you any more than what you're already paying. We're just going to reallocate some of the fees. Okay, well, thanks everyone. A little longer than I thought, but I think there was lots of good dialogue there, and we can. I look forward to chatting with you, and we'll talk to you soon.